stop them. That's okay if you wanted to use it. But we actually going to do some practice with inner classes. So right now we've been declaring classes in the separate files, but you don't actually have to do that. You can actually create classes inside another class. And this is what we're going to be doing. So the inner classes, this is what it looks like. So let's say you have a building, it could be a house, it could be the actual building, like a tower or something like that. And then inside it, you have an inner class, which is the door. And it doesn't have to be static, it could be non-static class, but you can actually do something like that. So this right here, this is the building class. And then you have methods, constructor, anything that you want. And most likely what happens is at the end, this is where you declare an inner class. Remember, it goes inside the outer class. So I like to call the outer class, excuse me, and the inner class. So inner class would be the door, and it doesn't only have to be one. You can have multiple inner classes in there. So you can have a class for a window, you can have a class for doorknob and all that stuff. So let's actually do an example of that. Let's code it and you'll see you'll be able to see the difference. Go back to IntelliJ. I'm going to use the same class as this project, but you can use any main class that you want. And I'm going to take the imports out. So no, I'm going to create a new project. Sorry about that. Let's create a new project and classes. You will see my new project. It's called inner classes. I'm going to add a new class in there, Java class, and I'll call that inner class. I need a main method in there, so I can actually write main and adds that in there automatically. So the reason I don't show you any shortcuts in 219 or 218 is because once you start using the shortcuts, you actually don't know what each of these things mean. You don't get practice writing it. And once you get to the interview, you're like, oh well, I just type in the main. I don't know what any of this means. And once you say that in the interview, then yeah, I don't know if they'll let you continue the interview. Because you have to know what each of these means. That's why I don't show you any shortcuts. All right, so you have the main class. What we're gonna do is we're gonna add one more class, and let's go with let's say car class. Yeah, let's go with car class. If I add one more class, it's gonna be the object class, and we're gonna add that in there. So what things can we add for the car class, car object? So we're gonna try to add the fields. And what fields can we add? Color, yep. So we can add the color, wheels, make, model. So let's do string. I'm gonna try to keep it simple. So let's do make and model. So make and model, and then what things do you need after that? So we can use the generate. We can add the constructor. And so with the constructor, I'm gonna select both of the parameters. I'm gonna click OK. And it's going to add the constructor in for me. So at this point, you should be familiar with how to write the constructor, getters, and setters. So that's why I'm using the generate. Otherwise, I was going to actually write everything from scratch. But at this point, you should be familiar with what each of these means. So we can set this to private, obviously. So why do we set this to private? I think we went over that before. But why do we set the fields to private? So they cannot be changed from outside the class, exactly. So remember, the user, you cannot trust the user, and they'll try to add anything to this. And let's say this is a string, and you want it to be a string, but they can add an object in there, and they'll still be able to create a car with that, but in your code that wouldn't make sense. So you right-click on anywhere in the class, and there's an option to generate or do Alt Insert. I think Alt Insert is an option also. But generate, and you select what do you want to generate. There's a lot of methods you can generate. So the methods you generate are pretty much as getters and setters, constructor, and the toString method. But everything else, I don't think you want to generate that. So now what we can do is we can create another class. So let's do public class that is right below the constructor, and let's do engine. So car needs an engine, and we can actually add that in there. So now this is the inner class. So we're going to use a lot of inner classes this quarter. What about engine? What can we add in the engine? Running or not? We can set a boolean in there. Yes. So we can set a boolean, or we still gotta define the engine, right? How do we actually define the engine? Cylinders. Yep. So engine code, engine model. So let's do cubic inches. Yeah, I don't know much about engine, so I'm gonna set some fields and engine code. So go with code. Well, let's go with model. We are already using model up there. Type, we just do type of engine, right? And then I want to stick with two, so we can do horsepower. So horsepower, set it to int, or we can set it to double. And I'm gonna right click. I'm gonna generate, and I'm gonna add it. So I did generate inside the engine class. That's why it's showing me the constructor for the engine class. So if I right click outside, which is the outer class, that's when it actually showed me constructor for the outer. So I'm gonna add that in there, constructor. So in the engine, let's do like a toString method. So I'm gonna try to generate toString and see what that does. So I'm gonna generate toString. I'll click OK. That's actually pretty nice. So engine type horsepower. So toString method generated, and actually generates type equals to that, horsepower equals to this. And we can, if you wanted to, we can add more things to it. So let's actually add it belongs to. So what's cool about the inner classes are, even though the fields are set to private, you can actually access those fields in this inner class because it's in the same file. You're actually able to access these files, the car fields. So it belongs to car. Let's do like this and model, and we can add the model. So it doesn't matter. Remember, I didn't have to do car.make, car.model. I can actually start using the names of the fields right here because they're in the inner classes. And the reason still stands, right? So we still set it to private, nobody else can access it, but the inner class can access it, because what happens most of the time is whoever is writing the outer class is the author of the inner class. So that is the best option to use the inner classes. So you can actually use the private fields interchangeably. So we have a toString for inner class, and we can actually write. Actually, not going to write that in there. So now, how do you actually create a class? So you have car class, and let's say it is my car equals to new car, and then you get to define the make and the model. Let's do what's make and the model. Honda Civic, Volkswagen, and what's one of their cars model? I don't know any Volkswagen. And now, what if you wanted to create an engine? How can we do that? Can we do something like this? So it's giving me an error. It's giving me stuff to add. It's saying that, do you mean car.engine? So you're not able to access the inner class. You cannot create instance of it without going through the outer class. So I remember the outer class is car. So you cannot create an instance of engine just like this. You actually have to do car dot, and then you can access the engine. And the string type, anybody want to take that? What's the V8? And horsepower. So why is this giving me an error? So we did car.engine, but this is one thing it's really bothers me too. If you want to create an inner class instance, you actually have to do it like this. I believe this would work. Oh no, I'm sorry. You actually have to go through the instance of a car like this. That's how you can actually get to creating a new instance of engine. So when you have an inner class, this is the correct way. And remember that it's not static. So when we'll add a static keyword in there in a minute, and you'll be able to see the difference. But the static is not there. It's not a static class. And this is how you actually create an instance of an inner class. That makes sense? So I just wanted to give you an example of that. So let's come in here and let's say we add one more field. Actually, not the field, but the parameter of a car. Let's add that in there. And let's do an engine. So we add one of the parameters and we call that engine. Every car has an engine, and then we still need to initialize this right here. And we can set it to engine. Can we do it here? Equals to new engine. I'm sorry, we do root 6. And then we have 400. So now whatever the engine they pass in, we can actually initialize it right there. And now, how do we actually pass in the engine now? New engine, and then we initialize it. That's going to be car engine, and then we pass in comma. Remember, to create a new instance, we actually have to have a car object in order for it to go through it. Mustaqeen, where it is an error. We're not able to do this. Is this what are you talking about, or somewhere else? Yeah. So it is an error because remember, in order for us to get to the engine, we have to go through the car instance, and we cannot create a car instance without creating engine. So the way we have it set up right now, but that we can actually go and change that. So as soon as you turn the class to static, right here, see what happens. As soon as you turn into static, you don't have access to the outer class fields in the inner class. So what happens is with the inner class, let me actually try to draw that out too. So you have the inner class right here, outer class. So there is a relationship going back and forth, right? If they're non-static. As soon as you turn the inner class to static, this relationship is gone. You cannot access the fields from the outer class, and you cannot do that. There's only, I think as soon as you set that to static, there's only one relationship now going one way, which is the outer class can access inner class, but the inner class cannot access the outer class. So if you look at if you go over the slides, it actually explains all of that in the slides, but I wanted to do the code and show you what they actually mean. So as soon as you do that, you can create an instance just like this. But that relationship is gone. Now that toString method is broken because you don't have access to those fields. So you just gotta pick which works for you. So if you want a static, non-static, but you make sure, just keep in mind as soon as you set the inner class to static, you're gonna lose that ability to access all the, but then you're able to do something like this. I think this is actually a little wrong. I should have just created a field engine and then engine equals to, because this is redundant right now. So once again, he said, why is engine not an error? So we can actually use this right here. So you're talking about this, right? I'm guessing this is what you're talking about. We can actually use an object as the fields. So if we can create, as soon as we create an object, that we can use that as one of the data types. And we can pass that in, yes. So this is allowed. And how can we fix this now? Because right now I changed the inner class to static. This syntax doesn't make sense anymore. Is there a way to fix it? So remember, if it's static, we actually don't have to go through the instance of the outer class object. So we can get that out of the way, and we only need to do something like this. We can still create it, but the syntax for creating it is a little different. That's static versus non-static. So it's not like one is better than the other. It's just whatever you're trying to do for your code, however you're designing the classes, that's what the one you want to use, the static or non-static inner class. Just keep in mind when it's static, what happens? What's the drawback? Anybody? What's the drawback for static? You don't have access to the outer class field. So you don't have access, you don't have the relationship going back and forth anymore. Where do you use engine object? We're using it as a field in the car class, even though it's a inner class, but we can actually use that here.